In the shadowed corridors of human ambition, where dreams collide with reality and weakness battles strength, there exists a fundamental truth that most dare not acknowledge: evolution is not merely biological, it is psychological, strategic, and ruthlessly selective. The weak perish not through natural selection alone, but through their own failure to recognize and eliminate the deficiencies that anchor them to mediocrity. This document serves as both mirror and scalpel, reflecting the harsh realities of personal transformation while cutting away the comfortable illusions that prevent true growth. Drawing from the profound insights of Niccolò Machiavelli, whose understanding of human nature transcended his era, we explore the merciless evolution that separates those who achieve their dreams from those who merely dream. The prince who rules effectively must first rule himself. The individual who seeks to conquer their circumstances must first conquer their own limitations. This is not a gentle journey of self-improvement, it is a calculated campaign of personal warfare where the enemy lies within, disguised as comfort, habit, and the seductive whisper of good enough. Consider the young merchant who dreams of building a trading empire but cannot wake before dawn. His weakness, the love of comfort over discipline, becomes the invisible chain that binds him to his current station. Each morning he chooses sleep over opportunity, he feeds his weakness and starves his dream. The evolution he needs is not gradual, it is immediate and absolute. He must kill the part of himself that prioritizes comfort over conquest, replacing it with the iron will of someone who understands that empires are built in the hours when others rest. This transformation requires what Machiavelli understood as the balance between the lion and the fox: strength and cunning, force and strategy. The weak points in our character are not merely obstacles, they are enemies of the state of our being. They must be identified with the precision of a military intelligence operation and eliminated with the ruthlessness of a political purge. The businessman who struggles with indecision has already lost half his battles before they begin. In boardrooms where millions are won and lost on split-second choices, hesitation is not merely a weakness, it is a death sentence. The evolution required here is the development of what we might call strategic intuition, the ability to process complex information rapidly and act with conviction even in uncertainty. This is not recklessness, it is the calculated courage of someone who has trained their mind to see patterns where others see chaos. Yet this evolution cannot be sustained through willpower alone. The architecture of transformation must be built on understanding the mechanics of human motivation. Machiavelli observed that men are moved more by fear than by love, more by immediate consequences than distant rewards. The individual seeking to suppress their weak points must become their own benevolent tyrant, creating systems that make weakness painful and strength rewarding. The aspiring writer who dreams of literary greatness but struggles with procrastination must engineer their environment to make writing easier than not writing. This might mean removing all distractions from their workspace, establishing accountability systems that make failure publicly visible, or creating reward structures that provide immediate gratification for progress. The weakness of procrastination thrives in environments where delay has no immediate consequence. Change the environment, and you change the behavior. This principle extends beyond individual habits to encompass entire life structures. The person who dreams of financial independence but cannot control their spending must redesign their relationship with money itself. This requires more than budgeting, it demands a fundamental shift in how they perceive value, success, and personal worth. They must evolve from someone who seeks validation through consumption to someone who finds satisfaction in accumulation and growth. The social dynamics of this evolution are equally crucial. Machiavelli understood that a prince must carefully choose his advisors, surrounding himself with those who would speak truth rather than flattery. In personal development, this translates to the ruthless curation of one's social environment. The dreams of extraordinary achievement cannot survive in the company of ordinary thinking. The individual must evolve their social circle as deliberately as they evolve their skills. Consider the entrepreneur who surrounds herself with friends who celebrate small wins and discourage big risks. Their well-meaning concern becomes a form of psychological gravity, pulling her ambitions back toward the safe and familiar. The evolution required here is not just personal but social, the development of relationships that challenge rather than comfort, that raise standards rather than lower them. This creates one of the most painful aspects of personal evolution, the loneliness that accompanies growth. As one's standards rise and weaknesses are systematically eliminated, the gap between oneself and former peers inevitably widens. This isolation is not a side effect of growth, it is often a prerequisite. The dreamer must learn to find strength in solitude rather than seeking validation from those who cannot understand their vision. The psychological mechanisms that drive this evolution operate on multiple levels simultaneously. At the surface level, there is the conscious decision to change, the setting of goals, and the creation of plans. But beneath this lies the deeper work of identity transformation, the gradual but complete rewiring of how one sees themselves and their place in the world. The individual who has always seen themselves as not a morning person must undergo an identity shift to become someone who naturally rises early. This cannot be accomplished through discipline alone, it requires a fundamental change in self-concept. They must begin to see early rising not as something they force themselves to do, but as something they naturally do because of who they are. This identity-level change is what makes behavioral evolution sustainable rather than temporary. The fuel for this transformation comes not from external motivation but from the alignment of action with authentic desire. The dreams that survive the evolutionary process are not those imposed by society or family, but those that emerge from the deepest levels of personal truth. This creates what might be called evolutionary momentum. Each step forward feels not like sacrifice but like coming home to oneself. The successful surgeon who dreamed of medicine from childhood does not experience the long hours of training as hardship but as progression toward their natural state. Their weak points, perhaps a tendency toward perfectionism that initially slowed their learning, become strengths when channeled properly. The evolution is not about becoming someone different, but about becoming more fully who they already are beneath their limitations. This process requires what Machiavelli would recognize as strategic patience, the ability to endure short-term discomfort for long-term advantage. The evolution of character cannot be rushed, but neither can it be delayed indefinitely. There exists a narrow window of opportunity in most lives when the conditions are right for dramatic transformation. Those who miss this window often find themselves trapped not by external circumstances but by the calcified habits of their own making. The recognition of this window requires sophisticated self-awareness. The individual must develop the ability to see themselves as both subject and object, participant and observer in their own transformation. This dual consciousness allows for the strategic manipulation of one's own psychology using behavioral psychology techniques on oneself with the calculated precision of a political campaign. The creation of new habits must be approached as a military operation, with careful planning, resource allocation, and strategic thinking. The person seeking to eliminate the weakness of poor time management cannot simply decide to be more organized, they must create systems that make organization inevitable. This might involve designing physical environments that prompt organized behavior, establishing workflows that build organization into every process, and creating feedback loops that make disorganization immediately visible and costly. The evolution of personal character follows the same principles that govern all evolutionary processes: variation, selection, and reproduction. The individual must first create variation in their behavior, trying new approaches and strategies. Then, they must ruthlessly select which variations produce better results, eliminating those that don't serve their goals. Finally, they must reproduce successful behaviors until they become automatic and integrated into their identity. This process is accelerated by what might be called evolutionary pressure, the deliberate creation of circumstances that make old behaviors impossible and new behaviors necessary. The entrepreneur who burns the bridge to their old career creates evolutionary pressure that forces adaptation. The student who publicly commits to a challenging goal creates social pressure that drives performance. The artist who moves to a city where their art must succeed for them to survive creates economic pressure that fuels creativity. But this pressure must be carefully calibrated. Too little pressure allows for comfort and stagnation, too much pressure can create paralysis and breakdown. The individual must become skilled at reading their own psychological state and adjusting the pressure accordingly. This requires the development of what might be called psychological flexibility, the ability to adapt one's approach based on changing internal and external circumstances. The measurement of progress in this evolutionary process cannot rely solely on external metrics. While achieving specific goals is important, the deeper transformation occurs in the realm of character and capability. The individual who has successfully suppressed their weak points and fueled their dreams will find that they have developed new capacities that extend far beyond their original objectives. The businessman who evolved from procrastinator to decisive leader doesn't just run a successful company, he approaches all areas of life with the same strategic thinking and execution capability. The artist who overcame their fear of criticism doesn't just create boldly, they engage with all of life's challenges from a place of creative confidence. The evolution creates what might be called transferable excellence capabilities that elevate performance across all domains of experience. This transferability is what makes the evolutionary approach to personal development so powerful. Rather than improving isolated skills or achieving specific goals, the individual develops fundamental capacities that serve as the foundation for whatever they choose to pursue. They become the type of person who naturally succeeds rather than someone who occasionally achieves success through effort. The maintenance of these evolutionary gains requires ongoing vigilance. The weak points that have been suppressed do not disappear permanently, they must be continuously managed and monitored. Like a reformed alcoholic who knows they are always one drink away from relapse, the evolved individual must maintain awareness of their former limitations and the circumstances that might allow them to resurface. This maintenance is not a burden but a source of strength. The constant awareness of potential weakness creates humility and preparedness that actually enhances performance. The leader who remembers their former indecisiveness is more likely to maintain clear decision-making processes. The entrepreneur who recalls their past procrastination is more likely to maintain productive habits and systems. The societal implications of this individual evolution extend far beyond personal success. When individuals successfully transform themselves according to these principles, they create ripple effects that influence their families, organizations, and communities. The evolved individual becomes a catalyst for evolution in others, not through preaching or teaching but through example and expectation. The parent who has mastered self-discipline naturally raises children who value discipline. The leader who has eliminated their weak points creates organizational cultures that don't tolerate weakness. The entrepreneur who has fueled their dreams with strategic action inspires others to pursue their own ambitions with similar intensity. This creates what might be called evolutionary contagion, the spread of higher standards and capabilities throughout social networks. However, this influence must be wielded with the wisdom that Machiavelli advocated for political leaders. The evolved individual must understand that not everyone is ready for or capable of the same level of transformation. The attempt to force evolution on others who are not prepared for it can create resistance and resentment. Instead, the evolved individual must learn to model excellence while allowing others to choose their own level of development. This requires the development of social intelligence that complements personal evolution. The individual must learn to read the developmental capacity of others and adjust their expectations accordingly. This is not about lowering standards but about meeting people where they are while maintaining one's own elevated position. The long-term perspective on this evolutionary process reveals its true nature. What appears to be personal development is actually a form of strategic positioning for the opportunities and challenges that lie ahead. The world is becoming increasingly competitive and complex, rewarding those who can adapt quickly and penalizing those who remain static. The individual who proactively evolves their capabilities is positioning themselves to thrive in this environment. The technological acceleration of change means that yesterday's advantages quickly become today's necessities. The person who develops exceptional focus and learning ability today will find these skills increasingly valuable as the pace of change accelerates. The individual who masters emotional regulation and strategic thinking will be better equipped to navigate the psychological challenges of an increasingly uncertain world. This forward-thinking approach to personal evolution requires the development of what might be called anticipatory adaptation, the ability to identify and develop capabilities before they become obviously necessary. This requires both strategic thinking and intuitive sensing, the ability to see patterns and trends that others miss. The entrepreneur who anticipates the skills that will be valuable in the coming economy and begins developing them before others recognize their importance gains a significant competitive advantage. The professional who evolves their capabilities ahead of industry changes positions themselves as a leader rather than a follower. This anticipatory approach transforms personal development from reactive improvement to proactive positioning. The integration of all these elements, the suppression of weak points, the fuel of authentic dreams, and the strategic management of personal evolution, creates what might be called a self-optimizing system. The individual becomes capable of continuous improvement and adaptation without external direction or motivation. They develop internal feedback loops that automatically identify areas for improvement and generate the motivation needed to pursue enhancement. This self-optimizing capacity is perhaps the ultimate goal of the evolutionary process. Rather than achieving a static state of perfection, the individual develops the ability to continuously evolve in response to changing circumstances and expanding opportunities. They become anti-fragile, not just resilient in the face of challenge but actually strengthened by difficulty and change. The economic implications of this approach to personal development cannot be ignored. In an economy that increasingly rewards unique capabilities and punishes commoditized skills, the individual who can rapidly evolve their value proposition has a significant advantage. They become what economists call a non-substitutable resource, someone whose unique combination of evolved capabilities cannot be easily replaced. This economic perspective reinforces the ruthless approach to personal evolution advocated by Machiavellian principles. The market does not reward good intentions or partial efforts, it rewards results and capabilities. The individual who cannot deliver superior performance, regardless of their personal journey or efforts, will find themselves economically disadvantaged. This reality creates what might be called evolutionary necessity, the imperative to develop exceptional capabilities not for personal satisfaction but for economic survival. The individual who fails to evolve risks not just personal disappointment but economic irrelevance. This adds urgency and stakes to the developmental process that can actually accelerate transformation. The psychological frameworks that support this evolution must be robust enough to withstand the inevitable challenges and setbacks that occur during any significant transformation. The individual must develop what psychologists call resilience, but, more specifically, they must cultivate anti-fragile resilience, the ability to become stronger through adversity rather than simply surviving it. This requires a fundamental shift in how challenges and failures are interpreted. Rather than seeing setbacks as evidence of inadequacy, the evolved individual learns to see them as information about what adjustments are needed in their approach. Every failure becomes data for optimization rather than evidence for giving up. The development of this anti-fragile mindset requires practice and conscious cultivation. The individual must train themselves to automatically look for the growth opportunity in every challenge, to find the strategic advantage in every setback. This is not positive thinking or self-deception, it is strategic reframing that serves the larger goal of continuous evolution. The culmination of this evolutionary process is the emergence of what might be called evolved leadership, the ability to influence and guide others not through position or authority but through demonstrated excellence and strategic thinking. The individual who has successfully transformed themselves according to these principles naturally attracts followers and opportunities because others recognize the value of their evolved capabilities. This leadership is not pursued for its own sake but emerges naturally from the development of superior capabilities and strategic thinking. Others gravitate toward those who demonstrate the ability to achieve their goals and overcome their limitations because they hope to learn and benefit from these capabilities. The responsibility that comes with this evolved leadership must be handled with the same strategic thinking that guided the initial transformation. The evolved individual must understand that their influence extends beyond their immediate goals and impacts the development of others. This creates both opportunity and obligation, the chance to create positive change on a larger scale and the responsibility to use that influence wisely. As this document draws toward its conclusion, it becomes clear that the process of suppressing weak points and fueling dreams through merciless evolution is not a destination but a way of being. It is not something one accomplishes and then moves beyond, but rather a fundamental approach to life that creates continuous growth and adaptation. The individual who fully embraces this evolutionary approach finds that their relationship with challenge, change, and uncertainty is fundamentally different from that of others. Where others see problems, they see optimization opportunities. Where others feel overwhelmed by complexity, they see patterns and strategic possibilities. Where others retreat from difficulty, they advance with calculated courage. This transformed relationship with life's challenges creates what might be called evolutionary momentum. Each success builds capacity for greater success, each overcome limitation creates strength for facing larger challenges. The individual becomes like a river that grows stronger as it flows, gathering power and capability with each mile traveled. The legacy of this approach extends beyond individual achievement to influence future generations. The principles and practices that guide personal evolution can be transmitted to children, students, and followers, creating multi-generational improvement in human capability and achievement. This is perhaps the highest expression of the evolutionary approach, not just personal transformation but the elevation of human potential across time. The final wisdom of this Machiavellian approach to personal evolution lies in its recognition that true power comes not from external control but from self-mastery. The individual who has learned to suppress their weak points and fuel their dreams has developed the most valuable form of power, the ability to shape their own destiny through strategic action and continuous adaptation. In a world of increasing uncertainty and accelerating change, this capacity for self-directed evolution becomes not just advantageous but essential. Those who can adapt, overcome their limitations, and pursue their authentic goals with strategic precision will thrive. Those who cannot will find themselves left behind by the merciless but magnificent process of human evolution. The choice, as always, belongs to the individual. But the principles are clear, the methods are proven, and the stakes could not be higher. The evolution awaits those bold enough to suppress their weak points, strategic enough to fuel their dreams, and committed enough to undergo the merciless transformation that separates the exceptional from the ordinary. This is not the end of the journey but the beginning of a way of life that creates continuous growth, authentic achievement, and lasting influence. It is the path of those who refuse to accept limitation as permanent and who understand that evolution is not something that happens to them, but something they actively direct through strategic thinking, disciplined action, and unwavering commitment to becoming the fullest expression of their potential. The merciless evolution continues, and those who embrace its principles will find themselves not just surviving but thriving in whatever challenges and opportunities the future may bring. They will have become, in the truest sense, the architects of their own destiny and the masters of their own fate.